This episode contains descriptions of violence. Listener discretion is advised. You stand in the master bedroom while the early morning light filters through the curtains. The person sleeping beside you is unaware of the decision already forming in the room. You feel the weight of a .22 caliber semi-automatic pistol in your hand. It is small enough to control, heavy enough to end the life in front of you. The pressure in the house has been building for months. Money, arguments, debt, the feeling of being trapped inside a life that no longer fits the image you want to keep. The choice sits in the small space between your finger and the trigger. One pull, and the struggle ends. At least that is what you tell yourself. But the shot is only the first part. The story has to come next. You look at the person in the bed and no longer see a husband. You see an obstacle, a paycheck that cannot stretch far enough, a life attached to yours that has become inconvenient. And somewhere in the back of your mind, the explanation is already forming. A child, a gun, a terrible accident. The house is still quiet, but that quiet will not last. Soon there will be neighbors, officers, questions, and a version of grief that has to look believable from the doorway. You are not only preparing to fire a weapon, you are preparing to survive the story after it. On March 19, 1960, police were called to a home in Independence, Missouri. Inside the bedroom, a 25-year-old man had been shot in the back of the head while he was napping. A .22 caliber semi-automatic pistol was nearby. His wife told police their 2-year-old daughter had somehow gotten a hold of the gun and fired it. According to later reporting, the wife said she heard her daughter ask, "How does this thing work, Daddy?" Then came the gunshot. Since authorities could not disprove her account at the time, the husband's death was ruled accidental. His wife emerged as a young widow whose life had been shattered in an unfortunate moment. At the time, the couple had 2 children. The daughter placed at the center of Sherry's explanation, and a younger son. Jury, I'm not saying this couldn't happen. I've seen and heard about many seemingly impossible things, but I've been around 2-year-olds, and I am side-eyeing this mother very hard. I get why people hesitated. Nobody wants to believe a mother will place that kind of weight on her own child. All she needed was enough doubt for her version of events to buy time. The man in the bedroom was James Kine, a young electrical engineer. From the outside, they looked like a young family building a normal life in Independence. But investigators would later learn that money had been a source of tension inside the marriage. Bills were unpaid, spending caused arguments, and James's income was not keeping up with the life Sharon Kine wanted to live. After his death was ruled accidental, Sharon collected on his life insurance, which paid out about $29,000. That money changed the position she was in. She was a widow with 2 children who now had cash, public sympathy, and a story the authorities had not been able to disprove. Then another thread surfaced. John Boldish had known Sharon for years. there had been an entanglement, and he would later say SHAR-in had talked about paying someone to kill James before the shooting. Woldish's account would be challenged, and he described part of the conversation as joking. But the statement gave investigators another reason to look back at James's death with suspicion. Jury, it seems the tables are starting to turn, and I have to wonder what made John come forward. Was it guilt? Fear? Was he worried his own involvement with SHAR-in might make him look connected to the motive to get rid of James? I know nobody asked me, but when someone benefits financially from a death, has a suspect who cannot defend herself, and is said to have talked about wanting her husband gone, smells like motive. Investigators wanted to know whether the account they had been given could possibly hold. They tested the daughter with a disabled pistol. Accounts say she was able to pull the trigger and work the safety. That did not prove the story true, but it kept investigators from dismissing it outright. The rest of the physical evidence did not give them a clean answer either. Suicide was ruled out. Investigators could not recover usable fingerprints from the pistol's well-oiled grip. No paraffin test for gunshot residue was done for SHAR-in or her daughter, reportedly because the test was considered unreliable. The gun left investigators in a difficult place. Enough concern to keep looking, but not enough physical proof to break the account open. Jury, a 2-year-old being able to pull the trigger did not make the story believable to me. It only made it harder to disprove. I have questions about the test. What exactly did disabled pistol mean? Was it unloaded? Was the firing mechanism altered? Was she holding it the same way the shooting would have required? Those details change how much weight the test should carry. Toddlers can shock you with how much force they have behind their little hands. Anybody who's been smacked by a 2-year-old knows this. But pulling a trigger during a test is not the same as recreating the moment inside that bedroom. So no, that test does not clear the story for me. It only explains why investigators could not break it yet. SHAR-in used part of the money to buy a new car. That purchase put her in front of Walter Jones, a 26-year-old car salesman. Walter was married to Patricia Jones, a 23-year-old file clerk for the Internal Revenue Service. They had 2 children together. What began as a car purchase became another entanglement, and the relationship moved quickly enough. According to investigators, SHAR-in wanted him to leave Patricia, but Walter did not. That refusal placed Patricia in a dangerous position. Jury, I do not know what Patricia knew at first. I do not know what the Jones marriage looked like behind closed doors. For all we know, there may have already been problems. But whatever was happening in that marriage, Walter still played his part. He opened the door to that affair, and SHAR-in's intention did not stop at wanting Walter. It moved toward wanting Patricia out of the way. You can have all the new lives you want. Taking a life to get one was not the way. She needed to leave that woman alone. On May 27, 1960, Patricia Jones received a phone call from a woman claiming to have information about Walter's affair. The call led to a meeting. Patricia left home expecting to get answers about her husband. Instead, she was being pulled into SHAR-in Khan's control. The meeting moved to a place where SHAR-in could manage the encounter without witnesses. Jury, I do not answer numbers I do not recognize, much less go meet somebody I do not know because they said they have information. But this is me sitting here with hindsight, caller ID, and a true crime brain that does not trust anything random that pops up on my phone. Patricia was living in a different time. If someone called and said they knew something about her husband, I understand why she would want answers. What began as a meeting about Walter's affair turned into hours of unanswered questions. Patricia had left her children behind. She had not simply stepped away from her life. As the night stretched on, people began trying to retrace where she could have gone. The search pushed toward the outskirts of Independence, where the roads gave way to wooded ground. Walter started calling people who might know where she was. Patricia's carpool witnesses told him about the phone call she had received and the meeting she had gone to attend. Walter suspected SHAR-in. He called her, and SHAR-in admitted she had seen Patricia that day. According to the account she gave, the meeting had been about Walter's affair. That admission placed SHAR-in with Patricia before Patricia was found. After Patricia's body was discovered near Phelps Road, the weapon became the next question. She had been shot with a .22 caliber gun, but the pistol from James Kine's death was already in police custody. If SHAR-in was involved, investigators needed to know whether she had access to another one. They learned that after James's death, a male friend had bought SHAR-in another .22. When SHAR-in learned it had been registered in her name, she wanted the registration changed to someone else. Police searched for the missing pistol, but only found its empty gun box instead. Investigators had a problem. The gun they believed may have been used to kill Patricia was missing. Without the weapon, they could not make the ballistic connection they needed. Jury. SHAR-in was getting careless. Was her need for male attention crowding her judgment? She placed herself with the victim in the time frame of the murder and had access to the same caliber weapon. She didn't seem concerned with protecting her children. And where were her children? By May 31st, 1960, police had moved from questioning SHAR-in to charging her. That night, while Patricia Jones' family was still grieving her burial, officers went to SHAR-in's home and arrested her for Patricia's murder. SHAR-in went to trial for the murder of Patricia. The state had a circumstantial case, but it did not have the piece of evidence prosecutors needed most: a recovered weapon tied directly to the shooting. The missing gun shaped the trial because it left room for the defense to argue that suspicion had outrun proof. The evidence was circumstantial. In a murder trial, reasonable doubt can do what suspicion cannot. An all-male jury acquitted SHAR-in of Patricia Jones's murder. According to later reporting, the verdict was met with applause. Surprisingly, the case did not end. Missouri still had the death of James Kine, her late husband, whose shooting had first been accepted as an accident. In January 1962, SHAR-in went to trial for James's murder. This time, the state was asking a jury to go back into the bedroom on North High Street and reconsider the story that had protected her from the beginning. The prosecution leaned into the parts of the evidence that never seemed right, especially the doubts around whether a 2-year-old could truly explain what happened in that room. The jury found SHAR-in guilty of first-degree murder. She was sentenced to life in prison. Jury. SHAR-in's story made her Toddler the center of the explanation for her father's death. That is a brutal weight to place on a child. If SHAR-in had laid low after James died, she may have gotten away with it and I hate saying that, but I'm glad she didn't. That was never her child's burden to carry. After her conviction for James Kyne's murder, SHAR-in's defense team appealed the case to the Missouri Supreme Court. The appeal was not asking the court to decide whether SHAR-in had killed James. It was asking whether the trial itself had followed the rules. The issues center on jury selection. Because the state had waived the death penalty, the trial court used a smaller jury panel. SHAR-in's defense argued that she should have received the larger panel allowed in a capital murder case, even though the state was no longer seeking death. The Missouri Supreme Court agreed that the smaller panel had reduced the number of challenges available to the defense. That was enough to undo the conviction. Jury. When lawyers pick a jury, they start with a larger group of people and narrow it down. Both sides get the chance to remove people from that group. Some removals are because a person clearly cannot be fair. Others are strategic, and each side only gets a limited number of those. A smaller starting group gives the defense less room to work. Fewer people in the pool means fewer chances to remove someone they believe could hurt the case. The Missouri Supreme Court looked at that process and said SHAR-in's defense had been given less protection than the law allowed. That did not clear SHAR-in. It erased the conviction because the trial process had a legal defect. So the life sentence was wiped away, and the state had to try the case again. In September 1964, SHAR-in left Missouri for Mexico with Francis Samuel Pugliese, a man she had reportedly met in Kansas City only a few months earlier. Her children did not go with her. They were left with James's father, while SHAR-in crossed the border under the name Jeanette Pugliese, traveling as Francis's wife. The couple later said they had gone to Mexico to get married, but back in Missouri, SHAR-in still had an unresolved murder case waiting for her, and her bond agreement did not give her permission to simply leave the state and disappear into another country. Jury. With everything SHAR-in had going on, that looked like an escape. And why there was room in that new life for a man, but not her children, is beyond me. I cannot prove what she planned for Francis, but I would be lying if I said the thought did not cross my mind. After James, the insurance money, and Patricia, I would not have gotten within 10 feet of that woman. On September 18th, 1964, SHAR-in left the hotel where she and Francis had been staying and went out alone in Mexico City. She later met Francisco Paredes Ordóñez, a Mexican-born American citizen, at a bar. According to SHAR-in, Francisco invited her to his hotel room to look at photographs. Once inside, she claimed he made sexual advances toward her and that she fired to protect herself. Francisco was shot and killed. A hotel employee, Enrique Martinez Rueda, heard the gunfire and entered the room. SHAR-in fired again, striking Enrique in the shoulder. He survived, fled the room, locked SHAR-in inside, and called the police. Mexican authorities did not accept SHAR-in's version as simple self-defense. Their theory was that she had gone out that night looking for money, met Francisco, and shot him when he resisted. When police searched SHAR-in's purse and the hotel room she shared with Francis, they found more weapons and ammunition. One of those guns would bring the Missouri case back into the room. Ballistics later connected it to the murder of Patricia Jones. SHAR-in, girl, you couldn't come up with a better story than that? She must have been getting tired. Why couldn't Francisco bring the photographs to the bar or the lobby? Those damsel in distress antics did not work the same way in Mexico. This time, She was caught in the room, and the gun told a different story. SHAR-in was convicted for the killing of Francisco and sentenced to 13 years in prison. She was in custody at the women's prison in Mexico, serving a sentence that should have kept her there until the 1970s. But on December 7, 1969, SHAR-in disappeared. She was not present for roll call, and by the time the absence became a confirmed escape, the woman, known in Mexico as La Pistolera, was gone. Authorities searched transportation routes and alerted American law enforcement, but the trail went cold. Jury, I keep thinking about how different this escape might look today. In 2026, there would be cameras, databases, border records, digital trails, and entire communities of internet sleuths and crime watchers ready to do what they do best. In February 1970, less than 2 months after the prison escape, SHAR-in married a man named James Glabus in Los Angeles. She built a life in Alberta, Canada, under the name Deidre Glabus. She died there in January 2022. In December 2023, an anonymous tip tied everything together. Through forensic genealogy and fingerprint analysis, authorities confirmed Deidre was indeed SHAR-in Kine. Jury, all I can think is this. Was SHAR-in trying to recreate her past life by marrying another James? Maybe this James was more ideal. Maybe he offered the lifestyle, stability, or protection she had been chasing all along. Is that why he did not suffer the same fate as her late husband? In the official case closure announcement, a Kine family spokesperson said Shannon never faced the consequences of her actions and left them for her children to deal with. Jury, I hope every family affected by Shannon's actions has found some measure of peace, even if justice came too late to reach her. She entered lives like a storm, damaged what she touched, and moved on before anyone could fully recover. Join us next time as we look at a woman who wanted the money but not the responsibility that came with it. Slide into the shadows.